What was that all about, Bryce?
Hey, look,
are we back?
I'm no production guru.
I guess we're doing it over again. Welcome to Exotic Truth, episode 3. We got a lot to cover today, and we've missed you folks so much. It's been 2 weeks. Last interview we had, special shout out to AJ Scales from MLW, giving us a little bit of insight on the customer service side of pro wrestling. With this show, we aim to entertain the people and give the people some inside scoop. And
you were talking about we missed the people. Let's be completely honest. We missed Peps. If you recall,
I missed it.
Yeah, where the hell were you?
Well, as you know, the last time I was in a wrestling ring, things got out of hand. Zach
usually does.
I know
I played the video.
I know we've made up outside of the social medias, but this past couple weeks, I've had a lot to think about. I know at the Rumble Jack, I put my hands on you.
I said I'd forgive, but I'm not going to forget.
Look, I know I've already apologized privately, but here publicly on the air, I just want to say I'm sorry. And I took a whole week. I went off social media. I lived off the forest. I went to the Great Smoky Mountains.
I thought you were hanging out with Dolly Parton.
Well, I encountered her on one of the last days of my trip, and as Dolly said to me, she said, "Sweet, sweet Peps." I said, "Yes, Dolly." She said, "The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain." I reached in my bag. I put on my spandex. I didn't wrestle, but I felt ready to get back into the world and ready to be back with you guys here tonight at the Exotic Truth Podcast, episode 3.
That's why we can't let you out of our sight, because everything you just said. What the hell?
Putting spandex on in public?
What?
Come on, pal.
Everybody knows Exotic Youth don't wear spandex.
Well, guys, we've got a packed show, like Zach mentioned earlier. But before we get to our special guest, you guys got any shows this weekend?
I think we all have one this Saturday night. We're going to hopefully settle, something that's been going on for almost 2 years now. A corrupt daddy and his little sugar baby screwed us over time and time again. We got a new CW champion in CT Keys after he literally beat the shit out of every member of the ministry all at once.
Beautiful sight.
Hakeem finally gets what's coming to him when he takes on the returning flying fro Michael Walker. And then we also got the debut of Bad Magic.
Learning from a broken foot.
Yeah.
No, I know. That was an awfully quick recovery, man. I can't imagine what kind of factor his foot's going to play in this.
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of doctor this is that cleared him. But nonetheless, Peps, I want to hear from you. How have you been feeling about what went down last month at Coastal?
Well, quite frankly, I've been pissed off. But this Saturday, it's not only your chance to wrong you right, it's my chance. When I stepped in the ring with Chip Schuyler, I don't know if anyone's remembered the last time I encountered Chip Schuyler in singles action. It was a little show. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. Riot on Row.
Big Pop.
A couple times.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. But that got pretty brutal. But I can assure you, that's nothing compared to this Saturday. When I get my hands on Chip Schuyler, I'm going to make sure he never steps foot in Savannah again.
Well, Peps, I mean, I definitely feel what you're saying. And luckily for you, I'm a little bit more pissed off at Simon Sermon than I am at you. And I'm a little bit more pissed off at Gary Lamb. Why is it lately that everybody that I work for wants to screw me over? What's with all these conspiracies? And you too, Peps, but I could not believe you put your hands on me. And I just hope that this Saturday night you stay focused on Chip Schuyler so that we can get the damn job done.
You guys are getting screwed left and right. What a time to be injured. What a time to be injured.
We can't even talk right now. We must have done it on purpose. We should have probably.
Well, he's speechless because we've got a Georgia legend joining us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, chooches of all ages, it is the Dave Meltzer of Georgia wrestling, the man behind Georgia wrestling history himself, Mr. Larry Goodman.
Thank you.
Oh, my God, it's them.
Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me, although I don't know about a Meltzer reference these days. As much crap as he's been getting into, I'd probably rather do without that.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I was like, he hadn't had the best rep lately. Larry seems to have a lot of credibility these days. There's always going to be critics of the critics, but for the people who don't know, Larry Goodman has been writing. How long have you been writing for wrestling?
I'm really close now to 30 years.
So 30 years, he's been critiquing people's matches, pissing people off, calling people thin, which I find it hilarious. I mean, how can you not point out the appearances of what's going on? I mean, you're trying to paint a picture as a writer. But a lot of people think that Larry Goodman and Georgia wrestling history have no bearing on what goes on in Georgia wrestling, but that's not true. I'd like to say that Larry travels every weekend selflessly to go put people over and give people critique if they need it and be honest about whether you sucked or not. Larry, what inspired you to do that? What inspired you to write for wrestling, and how did people react to your first pieces when you first started?
Well, so in the mid 90s, the internet stuff was just really getting going, and you had these message boards and stuff, and like there wasn't like a PW Insider or anything like that. And I was really a Smoky Mountain Wrestling fan. And I noticed that some of their shows, they didn't really have anybody to write about them. Some of them they did. And I was also going up to, well, I guess that Nashville came later. So that was really Knoxville. So I decided I'll try my hand at this and write about these shows that nobody's writing about. And that's how it got started. And then I got my first byline with PW Insider for a Nashville show for Bert Prentice. That would have been, I think, 95. And then I met Bill Behrens up there because Behrens was working with Bert Prentice. And then when Bill Behrens started running down here in Georgia with Wildside, actually a little before Wildside, then that became a regular thing for me. And then really I was the first person who wrote about AJ Styles because nobody on the national level had any idea who AJ Styles was. And this guy was going out and doing all this incredible stuff. And I got the opportunity to be the first one to really write about him. So that was great fun. In the whole Wildside era.
You heard it here first, folks. The man who discovered AJ Styles.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was going to say is like a lot of people don't realize that you guys help people's name get out there for good or for worse. I mean, if you suck and you didn't have a good performance, everyone's going to know about it. But also if you're killing it and you're out there doing what you need to do, people are going to know more about you because of what you and Rob Rod and all those guys do. So it's very cool that you have done that. As far as your personal life, this is something I always wondered because everyone knows that like wrestlers are not the easiest to have a relationship with because we travel, we go different places every single weekend. What does your wife think about you traveling every weekend to go see different wrestling shows? I've always wondered that.
Well, so she was a wrestling fan way back when we used to go to the Omni and the end of the Georgia Championship Wrestling area and then the WCW era. So she gets it in that level, although she doesn't really get independent wrestling. So I would say she tolerates it, but she also understands it because she herself is a fan, and even now still enjoys watching wrestling. Like MJF's her favorite. So,
Okay.
So there is that. But yeah, like if I go to more than one show a weekend, it's a problem. So I don't usually go more.
That doesn't stop you though. But I always wondered that because I was like, I wonder if she's like into it or she's like, all right, he needs to get out of the house.
Yeah. So I have to give her a whole lot of credit for being as tolerant as she is through all this. Yeah. Yeah.
That leaves me thinking, Larry, what does a guy like you like to do outside of wrestling?
Well, I'm a big Atlanta Hawks basketball fan, and I like other sports. And I like movies. But lately, Jesus, between my work and wrestling and others and like a few other sports, I haven't had much time to do much of anything else, really.
Damn.
So you mentioned you like other sports. Why wrestling? Why write about wrestling? You mentioned, that it wasn't getting the national exposure or some of the shows weren't, but like, was wrestling like always something you wanted to write about? Was it just the time and place you felt was right, or why wrestling?
It really was time and place because I'd been a fan since I was a kid. but I never really thought about writing about it. And I did take I was always interested in sports journalism and sports journalists. And I took some classes in that, but I never really had the writing bug. And I really can't say really more about like why then did I decide to write about it? I'm not really sure. But what I found is once I tried it, I liked it. And then Al Getz, this is funny. Al Getz back then, he had an actual paper newsletter that he published and sent out. So Al Getz actually, quote unquote, hired me to write for his paper newsletter. Now that didn't last long, and it went to internet very quickly. But that's kind of how I actually got started with my first quote unquote writing job.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, is if it was ever in print. And speaking of in print, there was a wild story you sent me the other day. I couldn't read all of it because I didn't have the subscription access. But what's going on?
He couldn't read.
Yeah, I can barely read in the first place. But what's going on with the whole break-in burglary with the pornography and all this? What's going on?
Lord. This has been burning a hole in our notebooks.
So this goes back to how I wound up in Atlanta in the first place. And I talked a little bit about this on the Gunnar Miller interview, but I don't think I went into very much depth with it. Boy, where to begin with this? I don't know how much you want to know about this stuff.
Take us from the beginning.
Hey,
we got time.
All right. So this goes back to my dad. My dad was a frustrated actor, and he, did some local theater acting and so forth. And he got involved in film, and he got involved in film distribution in Chicago. And back then, there were independent film distributors because Chicago was a very difficult place to display your films. For one reason, if you think wrestling promoters are crooked, they can't hold a candle to movie theater operators. Plus, which in Chicago, you had the complication that the mob controlled the projectionist union. So, how many projectionists does it take to run a projector? One, right?
Three.
One, right? Yeah.
One.
Okay.
But the union had a deal that you had to have two. You had to have two on duty at all time. So what the mob did is you had to have two. They were mob connected, but only usually one of them showed up for work, and the other one just collected a paycheck. Anyway, my dad, by a roundabout way, wound up distributing two of the more famous X-rated movies of the time, Behind the Green Door and Deep Throat. And I know this is so old. Goes back so far. Does anybody even know what deep?
What's the time frame on this whole altercation?
We're talking about mid-70s.
Okay.
This was a notorious film. It was so notorious it was banned in the city of Chicago. You could not show it. They could show other things, but you could not show it.
Why was it that this one in particular was?
I think I've heard of that one.
Extreme.
In terms of what was in it, it was nothing much different than the others, but for some reason it got tremendous notoriety. Okay. And so the city banned it. And so when the mob, in order for that to be shown in Chicago, they were concerned about bringing it across state lines. So I remember I actually had to go out to the airport and pick up a guy who actually flew on the plane with the film cans so that they would not have to be shipped across state lines. Anyway, the mob decided that they thought there was a lot of money in this film distribution. By the time they decided to get into it, there really wasn't. My dad had moved on to distributing other films. You may probably heard of Lionsgate Films. Mm-hmm. At one time, he distributed one of their first films, and of course now they're huge. I think they're publicly traded company and all that. But so he was moving on from that, but he was still doing it. And the mob decided that they wanted to control that distribution. So that's what led to them, in essence, eventually giving my dad an offer he couldn't refuse. Except they didn't really say it outright, like, we want you out of business. In fact, their office was right in the same building where my dad's office was, and they would act friendly. But then they, what happened? I think what Zach's referring to is when they actually planted a firebomb into our house.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah,
yeah. That was the story I sent you. Is when they threw they threw a firebomb in our house.
That is crazy.
So anyway, I also during that time I was working for my dad some, and so those guys knew who I was, and they sent somebody to my apartment building, who like I'm looking out in the alley. And there's these two guys in a car. I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I'm looking out, and these guys come. They step on the gas and they drive towards me. Well, I ran the hell inside the building. I was scared shitless. So it was not long after that I moved to Atlanta. I said, I don't want anything to do with this. This is getting ridiculous. And not long after that, they actually after that, my dad basically said, "Okay, I'm out," and he sold to these guys.
That's what I was asked if you got the hell out of Dodge after that.
Yeah,
absolutely wild.
So he sold to these guys.
I didn't know if I was supposed to like feel bad or like laugh or what, but I like couldn't help but crack up laughing because I'm like, I would have never thought.
Yeah, it's such a wild story. Like
this.
And then the other story I sent. So a couple more things about that. So after our house was bombed, there was a guy who was a local mob guy. He ran an X-rated theater. His name was Patsy Riccardi. I mean, you talk about your typical, stereotypical Italian mobster. He wore the flashy diamonds on the flashy diamond rings, real nice suits. And he had a theater, and I was delivering to that theater. So I go there, and he comes up to me and says, "Who would do this? This is terrible." And of course, he knew exactly who did it.
Yeah. It's like, you tell me.
Right.
Wow.
That's crazy.
So the end of the story there is the other story I sent to Zach, which was a few years later. His real thing with the mob, besides the theater, he was a bag man to carry the cash from Chicago to Las Vegas. And the feds got interested in him, and they wanted to talk to him. And he was supposed to have a meeting with the feds. And I guess they were afraid he was going to talk too much because he wound up dead in the trunk of his car. He never made it to the meeting. So that was the end. That was the end of Patsy Riccardi.
Rest in peace, Patsy.
Yeah, you ought to make a Netflix special about this, Larry. That's amazing.
That sounds like a hell of a movie.
I just see like the image of you in that alleyway, like the little like sewage thing, you know, smoking, and here comes this car flying at you, running in.
So no wonder you ended up writing about wrestling. I mean, with these kind of articles being written about your family when you were growing up, like what's the only thing nearly as outlandish as that is wrestling. Probably. So, wow. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about that story, Larry? That's freaking crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is,
expecting the story to go.
Yeah, I mean, my uncle had lived in Atlanta for a long time. He was a director of the Human Relations Commission for the city of Atlanta. His wife actually worked for Coretta Scott King.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And so when all this went down, he said, "Would you like to come down to Atlanta?" And I visited here a couple times. But when that happened, I called him up and said, "Can I come down and stay with you?" And so,
so like after you moved, did you like fear like they were coming after you? Like, did you ever feel like,
okay, so
they follow you?
They followed?
No, but I will tell you. When I first got here, I was shaken up enough that there were a couple times I peeked out the window to look to see. I mean, as crazy as that seems, but how crazy is it when somebody's throwing firebombs in your house? Maybe it's not so.
Especially these days. I mean, back then it's like it seemed like they couldn't catch anybody if they crossed state lines for doing anything, you know.
Back then, it just seems like that was
people all over the Midwest, and then comes to the South, and then they've never heard of them. They can't get their arrest records or anything, and like, turns out they've been doing it for 40 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Nowadays, I don't think that kind of thing could really happen. I feel like they could definitely find you today.
Well, it's so funny. I mean, there is no Italian mob anymore. That's so long ago, you know. But that was a thing.
Apologies.
That was definitely a thing.
Well, yeah, they popped off Patsy. He was the head.
Yeah, I mean, goodbye, Patsy.
Yeah.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. But the other piece of that is that's when I really started to enjoy wrestling, because I grew up watching AWA wrestling in Chicago, which really wasn't that good. I mean, there was some good stuff like Dick Bockwinkel and Vern Gagne and Billy Robinson, but even then, as a kid, I could tell, you know, a lot of this wasn't that good. But then when I came to Atlanta, I started going to the City Auditorium, and I'd never seen anything like that. Never seen any wrestling of that level of intensity, that level of violence. 3,000 people. Almost every Friday night, that City Auditorium had 3,000 people, and it was a cultural experience. It was part of the city's landscape, was to go to wrestling on Friday nights.
So wrestling wasn't your typical, like what you hear of like Southern wrestling whenever you're thinking of like hokey gimmicks and things like that. It was more violence, more intense.
Well, and part of the reason for the intensity at that point, Ted Turner had started the Superstation. So when wrestlers came into Atlanta, they were getting national exposure. They were getting exposure they could not get anywhere else because he had the national TV outlet. So you had guys, we got to see everybody. Everybody nationally that there would come here at some time or another to get that exposure. So I got to see, like, you name it, they all came. If they were big stars at that time, they came.
Did you talk to them all back then the way you do to the guys now?
Nope, I didn't talk to nobody. I was just a fan in the crowd. Just a fan.
So that kind of brings me to the next question. So you said the wrestling that you first got to see in Chicago wasn't very good. It seems like you're the only person I know that will watch the absolute best wrestling and sit there and watch the shittiest wrestling just the same. Like, you'll pay equal amount of attention. So do you think that tolerance for like that kind of thing, for, you know, not great wrestling, do you get the enjoyment out of watching it the same way, or is it because you enjoy writing about it, or is there times when you're like, damn it, I wish I wasn't writing about this because this sucks?
There's times when I wish I wasn't writing about this because it sucks. But, you know, I hardly ever will go. So I've gotten people to request, like, for me to go to a show and do a hatchet job on it because it was a bad show, and people wanted, at least somebody wanted to see what I would say about it. I don't do that anymore. I mean, I never did it, but I don't want to really go to bad shows anymore. I don't really want to spend my time on it. So I don't hardly ever go to what I would consider to be low quality shows anymore, because it doesn't really interest me. Now, some people would say, and a lot of people would say, Pro South is a low quality show. And in a lot of levels it is. But what's not on the low level is the storytelling there. And that's what I watch that show for, and that's why I review it. Mm-hmm. Would I review it? Would I write about it, review it because of the quality of the wrestling? No, I wouldn't.
So you think that the storytelling is more what draws you to it than the athletic aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the athletic aspect of wrestling a whole lot, but I'm more drawn to the artistic, the art form, like what you guys are doing in CEW. There's the artistic drive that you have, and the vision that you have. That's what really interests me more now. Do I really like seeing a really great athletic match? Absolutely, I do. I mean, I love what Action does with really good wrestling. At RIPW Sunday, Hunter James and Teriyaki, they tore the house down. It was outstanding.
I could believe that.
Yeah. So am I drawn to go to shows because I'm going to see a match like that? Sure am. Absolutely.
No doubt. Cool. Yeah, I remember whenever we first started, it was like you kind of went everywhere because you would hear people complain like, oh, we don't get any coverage. So you'd go to kind of at least check out every show once.
You'd see why they're not getting coverage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I remember the first time I read a review that you had written of me. Well, I don't know if it was the first, but do you remember the first time that you seen each of us and the first time you seen us as a group?
I remember.
So I remember the first time I saw you in Peps, because that was at KLT.
I was thinking of a Pro South show
Mike Jackson.
Long time ago, back in the old Pro South building.
See, oh no, yeah. So now it comes to me now. Yeah. So you, Peps, you and Zach were on that show, and Zach, you wrestled Mike Jackson on that show.
Yeah, that's the one I thought. I wasn't sure if that was the first time.
Right, and that's when I said that Peps looked like Leonardo DiCaprio, except DiCaprio might be a better wrestler.
Ooh, I remember that one. I don't remember. We've done so many things. It's hard to remember everything, but that's one thing I'll never forget, Larry.
Me neither. I still laugh about it this day, and just like
I can laugh about it now.
The jury's still out about it. That was hilarious.
Bryce, I first saw. Was it Wrestle America or PCW? I can't remember which. I can't remember. I think it was Wrestle America.
Had to be Wrestle America.
Did he still wear the loafers?
I was probably
the loafers. The loafers, okay. Right.
I'd swap. It was probably me versus Dom Stuckey, because they had me wrestling him every month.
I had kept seeing Larry Goodman before you had ever written about us, or at least before I knew of you. And I knew Rob Rod because I started at APCW Robert's show, and Rob Rod was typically who covered that show. So I met him early on, and then I started to see Stephen Platinum because he'd get on there, being an asshole or whatever he was doing, calling people out kind of thing. Which I missed that, by the way. You should urge him to get back to doing full disclosure. That's hilarious.
Believe me, I have. And he keeps threatening to start him back, but he only did the one, and he's never really come back and done any more. I wish he would.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like something's got to piss him off enough for him to be motivated to do it. It's got to be juicy enough drama. Yeah. I feel like
that's true.
I was so scared when he told me, or he reached out to me and told me that he was going to watch the ladder match with me and Matt Odom. I was petrified. I was like, oh my goodness, this dude's about to reap us a new one after feeling so good about the match. And he loved the match and just shit on the commentary the whole time. And I was just well, there's that. So that was my first interaction with Stephen Platinum.
Yeah, I remember when I first met Larry, and it was anytime he was going to be there, he was this mysterious figure. It's what is this guy going to say? All that. But over the years, we've gotten to know him, and it's crazy. One of the few people to talk about wrestling philosophy with, just to hear how you think about it. It's very interesting, especially considering that you've never actually, which I don't think you have. You've never wrestled yourself, have you?
I've never wrestled a match. I took the one and only. I took that couple bumps at Pro South in an angle last year, but that's really the only time I've ever done anything physical in ring. I've only been in a ring to introduce people, and Simon Sermon had me come in the ring once.
Have you ever thought
even for the Leonardo DiCaprio comments over here?
I'm too old. I get broken.
I know
in
the
there.
booker in Savannah. I can pull some strings. We can make it happen.
Yeah.
Larry.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've been toyed with. They've toyed with putting me in some kind of battle royals a couple times in a couple places, but that's never happened. I was going to be a special referee for AJ Steele, and Tommy Too Much. They were going to do a blow-off match. They wanted me to be the special referee. It was going to be in a cage, but then the whole thing fell apart, and they never did the match. So I was actually going to have Daryl Hall give me some pointers about what to do, but it never.
So you mentioned taking the bumps and everything. As a fan, as somebody who doesn't take a lot of bumps, everything like that. How did that make you feel? Did you get an enjoyment out of it? Was it something I never want to do that again? Or
I loved it. I loved it because he took good care of me, because I didn't see Ace Haven being who he is. He didn't tell me what was going to happen before I got there. So I didn't really know what to expect. And then I get there and he says, yeah, well, we're going to have Brandon Watley give you his finish, the rock bottom. And I was like, what? What?
I'm going to leave now.
Was that the first time anybody ever asked you to do that?
I think he just got told. He didn't get asked. He just got
right.
told.
Yes. No, because he did ask me in advance. Said, we're doing this thing. Would you be willing to come down and we want to give out this award, but then would you be willing to take a bump? And he said some of the people are betting whether or not you'll do it or not. And so I said I would do it. And then so I actually got punched in the stomach and then wound up taking his finisher when it was really okay. The punch in the stomach actually hurt, but the rock bottom didn't.
That's awesome.
Would you do it again if you had to?
Yeah, I think I probably would. I remember as a fan, like thinking like, man, I always wanted to like get put through a table, or as weird as it was, get hit with a chair. Like, do you have any aspirations
No.
of doing that? Like, we're just trying to get ideas here.
No.
Man, I remember the first time I got hit by a chair in a match. I was wrestling Chick Donovan, and if you know anything about Chick Donovan, you got to be pretty close to him, or he can't see you properly. You know what I'm saying? So. In the middle of this match, it was not a no DQ or anything. He just throws me out of the ring, and I'm over there selling, and I get up, and this guy has went over and grabbed one of the fans' chairs, like right in front of the referee. It starts wailing me with it, and I'm like, "What the hell, dude?" Like in no disqualification, the ref just started jumping up and down. I'm like, "What the hell is going on?" And then Buff Bagwell killed us with a chair one time.
That was actually a plastic chair shot.
Yeah, I was hurting for weeks. That was horrible.
Yeah. That was my first chair shot, Buff Bagwell. I remember me and you taking a shot, Zach, and after I took the shot, I said, "Oh, F this."
I took a second one like a dumbass.
Or it might have been me and Bryce, because me and Bryce both took one, and I remember rolling away because I was like, "Screw that."
Yeah, Zach
and
then
I both one of us got caught in the middle.
Smart, because the camera was like pointing at the ground or something the whole time on the paper or whatever it was, right? Oh shit, man, that's hilarious.
One thing like I admire about you is no matter like what somebody says about your writing, whether they come at you for saying something harsh about them or, giving your honest opinion, like you're always back to writing the next time, and you don't like take to social media and like defend yourself ever. Like you just kind of take it at what it seems is like you take it at face value and just move on with your life. That's something that like a lot of people in the wrestling business aren't good at. If their feelings are hurt, you're going to know about it for weeks to come. Where do you like get that from? Like, cause I mean, like I said, it's very admirable for, you to be able to do that, cause it does put you in a hard spot.
Well, I think some of it might come from my regular work in counseling, that there's a lot of times there's many times you just have to have, what you may be thinking about saying or what you might like to say, you got to just let it burn your guts out. You don't say it because it would be unprofessional. It would be unhelpful. And the way I think about the writing is, it's an opinion. That's all it is. It's an opinion. It's like a movie reviewer's opinion. And I learn when people disagree, I learn from that, because sometimes I pick up on things. Oh yeah, I can see why they saw it that way. I didn't think about it that way. Now that thing with the female wrestler over in IWE, when I said she was painfully thin, I thought that was just ridiculous. And that was one of the only times I ever even wrote back in any kind of a thread, was that one, because I thought it was just completely ridiculous. But in general, no, I mean, I don't really worry too much about or think too much about what people say, because everybody's entitled to their opinion. And, there's some people's differ from mine. That's okay.
And I think that's good too. Like, you don't want to let people censor you, because then it's not good journalism, and our regular media is so much not like that. It's so much, everything's got an agenda these days. It's good that you're not willing to like compromise what you'll say to describe the situation. I think that's crazy as well. I've seen you get attacked kind of about stuff like that many times. Just trying. Yeah, and wrestlers, and I mean that paints the picture for somebody to see it.
I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I enjoy the writing part of it. I mean, or I wouldn't be doing it. And, I used people who remember the way my writing back in the early Wildside days and stuff. They say, oh, I've gotten soft, that I'm not as critical as I used to be, that I used to be more brutal. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe it is.
If it is true, there wouldn't be any wrestlers these days. Man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could have been as cruel as you were back then. I mean, not saying you were cruel, but like, I think a lot of times people want to hear what they want to hear, and like if you'll tell them that, then they like you, kind of thing. But I think it's more important to be someone who will be honest with them, whether they like it or not. And you've always been good at that, but I have noticed that you've kind of had to tone it down the last few years about being so critical because people just like bitch about it so much. So
yeah,
I mean,
the
wrestling
right.
in Georgia.
I mean,
now than it was a few years
we do have a lot of delicate flowers in wrestling that really don't want to be criticized. And, I think what I've noticed is the people who make it places in wrestling welcome critique.
Right.
I remember when Caprice Coleman was fairly new and he went to Wildside and he was just killing it there. And you could see that this guy was going to go places and do pretty well in wrestling. And I was a mark for him. And I'm talking to him and, telling how much I like this or that. And he said, well, what can I improve? What can I do better? He like think, oh yeah, he didn't want to hear how great he is. He wants to know how he can get better. So that made an impression on me.
That kind of goes into a question that I had is like, even though like, yeah, you're not quote unquote a wrestler. If you had to give advice to the people that you see every week in wrestling, whether good or bad, what would it be?
Well, I kind of try to give it in the reports. One thing that I would definitely say is, and that I see the wrestlers doing this as they get better, is figuring out what looks good and what doesn't, and doing less and sticking with the things that look good and figuring out what those are, instead of trying to do too much where you have one thing that looks good and one thing that looks half-assed, and then one thing that looks good and one thing that looks half-assed. So that's one thing I would say for the younger wrestlers, the less experienced wrestlers, is to focus in on that and really look critically at what you're doing as to what really is working and what's kind of that I should take out of my repertoire.
Yeah.
And character work, for sure, is so important. Work on facial expressions. Work on using body language. Work on playing to the crowd more. That's another thing I noticed is with the onset of matches being called in the back, that I see too many times wrestlers going on and doing their routine and losing touch with the audience because they're so focused on what they've called and getting all that in.
Right. Like they're not even acknowledging the crowd between spots and things like that. Yeah.
Right. You're not connecting.
Yeah, that's something that we always try to tell guys too, because a lot of times they just don't get how to do it subtly. You know what I mean? They think like, well, why would I turn around and go, wave at the fans or do something like that? I'm like, you got to be more creative about how you do it. You got to have your own ways of doing it, that kind of thing. But,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And like the last time, like right before I got injured, I had the privilege of wrestling in front of Gabe Sapolsky, and one of his pieces of advice for me was, I played to the crowd, but it was at times when I knew they needed to be played to, and it almost looked too scripted. It wasn't very natural that I was playing to the crowd. It was, I've got him in a headlock. Now I'm just yelling at him because I can in that moment. So I like how you were saying that, play the crowd, like Zach was saying, make it more natural. But yeah, that's just a free tidbit of advice that I got from him.
Yeah, that's great. Because when I first started, I couldn't even, and sorry to interrupt you, Larry, but like when I first started, I didn't even really listen to the crowd when I wrestled. I mean, I'd listen to the big reactions to the moves and stuff, but like now, when
I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it meant to listen to the crowd.
They'll tell you where to go.
But I mean, I think that comes with experience too, of like being able to make sure that you and the other guy are on the same track, and that you're still acknowledging the crowd too. But it's kind of tough at first, I think. But go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say an example that came to mind was Hunter James coming into RIPW, where those fans they didn't know him, or hardly any of them knew him, and so he's coming out as a heel. And the first thing he did was he gets in the ring, and the ring announcer, Ayla Fox, didn't have his info. So what he did is he just took over introducing himself, and immediately he had heat. Immediately they didn't like him for doing that because Ayla's good and the people there like her. So it's just a real simple way to engage them right from the get-go.
Right.
Yeah, Hunter is one of those guys that I've had the privilege in my short time of wrestling. Like, I've seen him come from the ground up. And like, he is like one of, like, Zach and I talk about it all the time, especially like booking him at Coastal. He's like one of those guys that we have watched kind of come into his own. Like, when he first started, you could see he was doing this like some other guys he was watching, and this like some other guys he was even on the same card as. And then to watch him like now, it's his own thing that he does. So it's pretty cool because he's like the only person that I can think of that I've actually seen kind of go from dirt to making a name in Georgia by himself.
A lot of times, like, I feel like guys will get a lot too much attention before they're ready for it. And I remember when I first met Hunter, he was already getting a lot of praise at the time, and I didn't really think he was there yet, and I felt like that kind of like hurt him in the moment. But he's somebody who really opened up his mind and like really listened to other people and asked questions to try to get better and really put in work. And I mean, it had been maybe like a year between times I'd seen him wrestle and actually paid attention to his match. And I was so impressed with the way that he can lead in the ring, like lead the other guy, control the pace of it and everything. I mean, for someone so young in the business, I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, because I think when it first clicked for me and you with Hunter, it was that match at GIPW where they did some type of finish, and like it was just placed so perfectly in the ring. It was just like, I don't think anybody else could have done that.
You rarely see somebody with fundamentals that are that good, especially around this area, just because they don't really drill that in a lot of the training in these areas. So
yeah, but Hunter's one of those, like, I mean, he's the lucky one in Georgia because he has all the right people in his corner. He's got the Todd Sextons, he's got the Rick Michaels, he's got he's got anyone in the state rooting him on and in his ear behind him, and he listens, which is the big key there.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot of
and it seems like he's always expanding his horizons and going to different places. Because I mean, I love like that you booked him into CEW, and the people that he was booked to wrestle. I mean, he's getting to do things he doesn't get to do other places, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, we tell guys when we bring him in, it's usually the first time. It's like, if you get over well, then we'll try you out again. But if you don't, then we'll tell you what to work on, and you can come back later. But Hunter got over, and he had a good match from the first time, and he's had a good match every time since. And if you have that, he's taken to heart. I've seen him actually change it. So he's killing it for sure. I hope the best for him on his journey. But who are some other people right now, Larry, that you think have a lot of potential?
Well, I just said in the report on RIPW, Tyler Stevens. I mean,
he's gone a long way for sure.
Oh yeah.
From a physical standpoint,
definitely.
Good Lord.
He's a wall.
If he keeps going, he's definitely one that I think is going to go places. And one of the things I'm liking about RIPW, and that got me interested in reviewing them and watching them in the first place, was getting to see all those WWA 4 guys and seeing what's coming through there. And there's a lot of promising guys. They're raw, but they've got athletic ability, and they could go places. So that's
they're like fearless. I mean, they're fearless, and they got good cardio, and they can do a lot of creative spots that are like more complex. I mean, they get trained up extremely well in that aspect. And we've had the pleasure of working with a lot of the guys from A4 over the years, and like kind of help bring the other side of it too, and like help some of those guys learn how to tell the stories, how to work the crowd. like Northside Heroes and Top Team. It's been awesome to see how far they've been able to go now that they've really learned how to work the crowd. I don't know if you've seen Northside lately, but they're freaking killing it.
It's night and day. I mean, how far they've come in the last 12 to 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
It was them versus Garuda and Damian Tangra. Were you there for that one?
Yeah.
That match really, really impressed me. When I seen that, I was like, damn, when I first seen Northside Heroes, I never would have thought that they'd be that good at any point.
You and me both. When they first came, the first time I really got to see them was when they came into Pro South. I thought, oh man, I didn't see it in them, but boy, they've come so far and learned so much.
The first time we worked with them, I think it was me and Bryce, and
it's crazy.
They wasn't like listen. They wasn't very well able to go with the flow. They wanted to just kind of go exactly by plan, and just didn't really have the instincts yet. But every single time I've seen them, they've improved. So that's killer. Anybody else?
Yeah, it's time for a hard hitting question, one that's probably going to make you think here.
Uh-oh.
If you had your own promotion in Georgia wrestling and it was a 5-match card, what would that card look like?
Oh, wow.
Pressure's on for this one.
Jesus.
That was a curveball.
Like
I stumped him.
You really did. There's just way
so much.
There's way too much to choose from is the problem.
Yeah.
You're the booker. You get to choose 5 matches. The world's your oyster.
Yeah, way too many wrestlers and not enough referees.
Well, the referee, I'd have Daryl Hall, so that'd be all right. We're okay there. I would probably want to put Exotic Youth in there in a tag or a 6. No, I think a 6-man if Bryce was able to go. Maybe a 6-man
for now. We'll go 6-man.
He can stand on the apron.
Barely.
One of us is going to hit the rope to go flying into the audience. That's what I was worried about. It just ruptured.
Golly, I'm so influenced by what I've seen recently. That's the problem. Because so right off the back, I'd say, yeah, I'd want to put Hunter James and Teriyaki in there because that was the best match I've seen in the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's one. I mean,
so hard.
No one said it's limited to matches you haven't seen before, or if you have. So
who would we be taking on the 6-man?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one.
Maybe the approved.
Okay. Ooh. I think that would be a first time.
That's never happened before.
That's never happened.
I've never been in the ring with any of the guys in the approved, and I looked at the list of the 50 guys or whatever. There's only like 4 or 5 people I haven't wrestled on it.
I wrestled Adrian at PCW. I've never wrestled Nick Halen. Is he who all's in the approved these days?
Bobby Moore, Rob Adonis.
Yeah, I never wrestled any of those guys. No.
Yeah, it would be like a first time.
Maybe being in the Rumble Jack or something for a second and punching one of them or something, but I don't think I've ever wrestled any of them.
If I was booking a card,
big money match right there.
I'd have to put Adam Priest in there in the singles, absolutely. And I don't almost care who he wrestled, because he could have a good match with anybody.
All right, so Larry's open challenge for Adam Priest. So we've got Hunter James and Teriyaki, Exotic Youth in the approved, and then an open challenge for Adam Priest. That's 3 out of your 5.
No women's match. If we actually, I take it back. I'd like to see Shalance Royal and Angelica Risk. If they've not wrestled, that's a match I'd like to see.
I imagine it's had to have happened.
All right, and if you haven't named it already, your main event.
Oh, God.
This was a good question. I didn't think it was going to be this way, but I'm loving this.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to give so much thought to it. I figured he'd already know off the top of his head.
No, I don't know. God, what would that be? I would say Cruel, but I've seen Cruel wrestle so many different guys that I don't know if that would be. I don't think that would be it. Who would I would want to make a match that I've never seen before.
Logan
but I'm trying
Creed
to think
versus Cruel.
but what would that would that be? Alec. Alice Kane, CT Keys.
Alex Kane,
good. Yeah, that would be good.
Which is a match I think we're going to see again. But I would want to see that again.
It's a pretty solid card, I would say. If I were a fan, I'd
pay to see it.
I wouldn't pay, but I'd see
it. Well, we were on the card, pal. We'd be getting paid to see it.
Right. I'd watch at the curtain, maybe.
But no, that was just my one throw it out there question for you.
Sure.
That was fun.
What's the best match and the worst match that you've seen each of us involved in, if you can think of that?
God.
That just came up with off the top of my head. I'm just curious.
That's really too hard for me to answer because I've seen too many. I mean, it's very hard for me to pick one.
I remember there was a couple that I had that
one of the worst or one of the best?
That was going to be in the report. You're like, yeah, that wasn't good.
I mean, I have to say, I haven't seen you guys in too many bad ones. Any of you?
We'll take that.
So
not even in the Loafer days?
I'll take that.
Loafer days were horrible.
What?
Well, I mean, you were so green then. I mean, what? Hey,
to each their own.
You got to take that into account. I mean, some of those weren't good, but they weren't like just terrible.
I always got to say about Bryce, like he's one of the best people I've ever seen who like didn't have a full like regular type training that everybody gets. He was just out there learning on the job, really.
You didn't have regular training, Bryce?
Yes and no. So I was trained by Michael Stevens. So he taught me pretty much the basics and like a couple of the moves in my move set. We trained for about a year and a half. He'd make us do like 5-minute matches and things like that. But once he was to the point of, there's nothing really more I can teach you. It's kind of like go learn. So it wasn't like a strict like wrestling school or anything. It was, hey, you learned this. Now we're gonna put you in this Rumble at WrestleMerica.
Like before shows, right? Like on show day.
Yeah. Well, no. We would meet at the old. We would meet up on Sundays at the old AWN building in Fort Valley.
Oh wow!
Just old shed, just tin walls.
Yeah,
it was hot as hell in there. But yeah, no. That was kind of my beginning of training. I mean, I don't regret it for anything. I mean, Michael Stevens taught me a lot and got my start as like the character, because that's what I gained a lot from Michael Stevens was like the character work. And
I didn't mean that as an insult, by the way. I just meant that, God, no. Have like a regular
right. No, I didn't. Graduating, Yeah, it wasn't one of the do 500 squats and then run these drills and all of that. No, it was hey, we're gonna run in circles and get your heart rate up. All right, now let's learn something.
Did any of you guys wrestle amateur?
Yeah, I did. Mm-hmm.
My brother did.
Oh yeah, Zach did.
And I did jiu-jitsu when I was younger. I did like grappling tournaments, stuff like that.
I guess that because that is one thing about where I started watching wrestling with the AWA. They were really big into the amateur background, into guys being really good amateurs. So that was one thing that I like. That's kind of stuck with me is I tend to gravitate more towards the guys who have that.
I definitely try to incorporate it whenever I'm with someone who I know can like look good doing that kind of thing. But if it doesn't start going the way that, like, if it doesn't start going in such a way that I think it looks good, then I'll quickly move on to running the spots, Yeah,
I just watch like Johnny Saint videos. So if you ever notice, I'll steal his, like if I'm in a wrist lock, I'll do like the roll forward, roll back, up, and then swap the wrist lock. I got that from Johnny Saint, and I'll do it anytime I can because no one does it, but it's just fun to do.
Yeah, and when you were just going back to what you're saying about advice to wrestlers is finding those little things that are unique that, like you just mentioned, that other guys aren't doing, and find those and do those to make you stand out, and not get caught up in doing the same stuff that everybody else is doing. And like right now, I'm so sick of the finish where guy pulls out one weapon, ref takes away, guy pulls out another weapon, or ref takes weapon away, guy kicks him in the nuts, pulls out another weapon. That variation, man, you're getting really tired of that. See it over and over and over.
I think I did that in the last match.
We've done that in the past a lot. I don't think we've done that recently, but we used to do that.
But so I think the problem now is I've seen it, once or twice a show.
Yeah. And that's one thing we tried to, harp on at Coastal is like, hear everybody calling if they're calling their match in the back, like, please listen, because we don't want the same thing happening over.
We're able to avoid that in some ways, but then we'll have like some simple shit will happen like 3 times in a row. We're like, what the fuck? This isn't something we thought we'd have to say because we didn't think anybody was going to do this anyway,
Yeah, like we got to the point a couple of shows where we were just like, work a different body part, please, God's sake. Like the legs can only take so much damage, like each show, unless there's like a story.
Hot, it was hot. That's why everybody was doing that.
I was pissed. I was like, but no, like that's just something that we do. Like we don't want the fans to see everything. Like MLW is very good at giving fans something different each match because they cater to the amateur wrestling fans. They cater to the normal wrestling, pro wrestling match. They've got the death match. They've got everything. And if you watch their shows, that is how they stagger it. They've got a gimmick match of some sort that's not a death match. Each match is just something different. And I find that a lot of people don't watch MLW like they should. But that's just something that they offer that a lot of promotions can learn from.
Yeah.
Everything.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Court Bauer's a really smart guy. I mean, I used to be a big MLW fan when they were, I guess, more prominent than they are now. I can't say that I've watched too much of it lately.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like a oversaturated market in like that kind of mid-level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, like I'll watch it for Logan. That's kind of why I watch it, just to show my support.
Support the guys that we know that are there and everything like that. And that was a good point you made, though, about like the multiple finishes. I think one thing that's always helped us to stand out, and this is something I try to tell guys, is like try to call a finish to where nobody else would be doing it, like one that nobody else would come up with. Just something that's, I don't know that everybody's capable of doing that because you got to have a little bit of a messed up mind, but.
Well, you guys must have messed up minds in that sense because you guys have pulled out something. I've seen more different types of finishes from you guys.
Twice.
With those finishes came a lot of like punches and blows from all three of us because Zach will come up with one idea and I'm like, that's the dumbest thing. Why don't we do this?
It's got to the point where Bryce will warn guys when we get to shows like they have something called or whatever, and then Bryce will warn him like Zach's going to come in here and try to recall all this, just so you know.
Yeah, like, I think it was at Disruptor. It was at Disruptor. When Zach and Peps were going to wrestle the Superstars, and then started the process of calling the match and everything, and I just hobbled over there to him. I was like, guys, like, don't get your hopes up. Like, I'm glad that y'all have like a finish that you want to do, but call it, and then it's just gonna get thrown. And
that's why
are gonna be
especially at shows. If I get there, if I get there before Zach, which often than not happens, and then I'll have opponents come up to me and like, do you have any idea of what you want to do? I'll be like, we can wait to call anything. They keep asking, like, you got any ideas? I'm like, yeah, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
You got to keep them on their toes, man. You don't want them to know.
I know it's going to go all out the window.
But yeah, that's the secret behind Exotic Youth.
This has been an awesome conversation, Larry. I really appreciate you coming on and joining us tonight. I've wanted to
thank you
for a long time because we always get Larry's opinion, but we don't get to know the man behind the pen. That you get a lot of heat, but we appreciate you, Larry. It's been good getting to know you over the years, and this is a fantastic interview.
We appreciate what you do. You don't get that a lot. We appreciate what you do.
Thank you, sir.
I know personally that you helped get our name out there, and giving us it's helped us get opportunities. So we do appreciate it for sure.
Most definitely.
Well,
man has been at the top of Exotic Roots payroll for years.
Let me mention one other thing. People have asked, like, which wrestler is Dusty Finish? And Dusty Finish.
Why the hell has that guy still got a pin?
He is a real person.
One question we didn't ask.
He's a real person. He's not a wrestler. And I don't know who Jimmy D. King is. I think he is a wrestler, but I have no idea who he is.
You know who Dusty Finish is?
Yes.
Have you met him personally?
No.
Let's not give him any publicity on this podcast.
We'll slip an extra in the envelope off screen.
There we go. Come award season, we'll.
I've got my guesses on who that is and Jimmy the King.
Uh-oh.
Well, Larry, before you go,
yes,
right now, who is your wrestler of the year at this point in Georgia wrestling right now?
Right at this moment, I would say CT Keys.
Good pick. Coastal Empire Wrestling Heavyweight Champion.
This Saturday night in Savannah, Georgia, when he defends the CW Championship against Randall Reno III. It should be fantastic. Came in, took the belt last show. It was his debut. Super impressive. Glad that somebody other than that rat bastard has the belt. So.
But once again, Larry, we do appreciate you for hopping on with us.
Thank you, Mike Goodman.
If you want to hang out, we'll be finished shortly.
Okay.
Well,
what a treat that was.
Conversation, man. Some of that stuff that he just said, like, I'm still thinking about. It's blowing my mind about the whole bombing story and everything else. I
never would have thought Larry Goodman. I never would have thought Larry Goodman would have mob ties from the 70s.
Hey. I didn't even think about it like that. Hell.
But here we are. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of these is like, because it not only helps us, but it helps, the other wrestlers, whether it's in Georgia, whether it's in Florida, wherever you're at wrestling. I mean, here in Larry's opinion, he's a Georgia legend, like I mentioned earlier. And he's not a wrestler, but he's got a lot of great advice that I feel like anybody could take. So,
yeah, I mean, don't get discouraged or like bitching and complaining if he doesn't like what you do. I mean, it's not the end all be all, but at the same time, like, you'd be wise to pay attention to what the criticisms of you are, whether you agree with it or not. And I think that's something that we can all learn from a little bit more.
Right. But
Larry Legend.
We're going to wind down here. What a great episode. Episode 3. Who would have thought? I never thought we were going to make it past 1.
We got it done.
Here we go.
I'm proud.
Anyways, from the Frat Daddy, from the Southeast Mouthpiece, and from what are you going? I'm
still waiting on a new nickname.
from the man with no moniker. This has been Exotic Truth.
Get ready, let's go.